What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be doing a complete hero guide for one of the most difficult characters to play as in Star Wars Battlefront 2, that being Chewie. This one has been a very long time coming. Chewie has easily been the most requested hero guide for years now, as I actually never got around to him in my previous run of hero guides when the game was still being updated. So it has been long overdue, guys, but he is finally here. In these hero guides, we're going to be covering everything that could possibly need covering, from base stats, ability stats, the best star cards for Galactic Assault and Supremacy, as well as some of the best maps to choose them on, some general tips for those game modes, the best star cards for heroes vs villains and HvV Showdown, which enemy characters you need to look out for, and then lastly covering some general tips for the hero game modes as well. So as you can see, this guide is going to be breaking down every single aspect of the hero. If you're new around here and you end up enjoying this video, then be sure to subscribe to the channel for more Battlefront 2 content, and be sure to hit that notification bell as well so that you are notified each time I upload more videos like this moving forward. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's get stuck right into it. So starting off with Chewie's base stats, and kind of the opposite of someone like Yoda, he has a really solid base stat line, yet it really doesn't seem that way when you're actually playing as him. Starting off with his base HP, he has 700, which is the equal highest of any of the blaster heroes, and as for how much health he can regenerate at once, his regen is 200, which is essentially the average for most blaster heroes in the game. In terms of his bowcaster's damage, there are a few different variants that I had to test out, those being hip fire and aim down sights, as it does pretty drastically change the way the blaster works. From the hip, each shot deals 50 damage to the body at long range and 90 damage at close range, and as for headshots, it deals 48 damage to the head at range and 144 damage to the head up close. When you're aiming down sights, the bowcaster deals 96 damage to the body from long range and 100 damage up close, and then it deals 139 damage to the head from range while dealing 145 damage up close. So as you can see, those stats all vary quite a bit, and they are definitely very unique compared to most other blasters. Most blasters in Battlefront 2 have a 1.9 headshot multiplier when you do land shots to the head. However, the reason Chewie's hipfire stats are kind of all over the place is because of the fact that the bowcaster shoots 3 different bolts when you hipfire it, much the same as a shotgun in a way, and so it is impossible at long range to get all 3 of those bolts to hit the enemy's head, therefore wildly reducing the damage stats overall. Now, his rate of fire works out to be only 66 shots per minute, which is without a doubt the lowest fire rate in the entire game, and this is where his weakness mostly lies, as this bowcaster is not really forgiving if you do miss your shots. On the plus side of that though, his blaster doesn't overheat at all, and I should also mention before I forget that his bowcaster is actually fully automatic, in case you guys didn't know. If you just hold the trigger in both hipfire or aimed down sights, it will work automatically. As for the spread, the hipfire spread is pretty wide honestly, however when you aim down sights there is literally no spread at all, similar to Han's DL44, so it is fairly well balanced across both of those modes. Now moving on to his abilities, and his ability set is pretty underwhelming to be honest. They do all serve a good enough purpose I guess, and there's a lot of variety at least, but overall his abilities are definitely not the best by any means. His left ability is his shock grenade ability, and this one explains itself pretty well in the title, causing Chewie to throw a grenade that shocks anyone who's in the area of effect when it explodes, which it will do as soon as it hits the ground. It stuns enemies for only 1.5 seconds, which is really not all that great, however in saying that any longer would probably be pretty frustrating and borderline OP, so it is fair enough really. I think the reason it just feels slightly weaker is because Chewie is so slow that when you throw it down it doesn't really allow you to run away or anything like that. Upon impact it will split up into smaller grenades and increase its area of effect, being able to stun multiple enemies at once so long as they are close enough, and it has a 15-second cooldown, which is pretty much what you would expect for a stun ability. Moving on, we have his middle ability, which is called Furious Bowcaster, and this is without a doubt his best ability by a pretty long margin, with this one actually being a genuinely good ability. When activated, Chewie overcharges his bowcaster, causing it to deal more damage and have a faster rate of fire, lasting anywhere from 7.5 seconds if you constantly shoot it to 25 seconds if you don't fire a single shot. It gives the bowcaster a huge damage increase, increasing the hipfire mode by up to 66% and increasing the ADS mode by 110%, meaning you can deal 210 damage to the body or a whopping 300 plus damage to the head if you can hit your shots, which is obviously just insane, and it requires a 20-second cooldown before its next use. Now for his right ability we have Charge Slam, which sends Chewie sprinting forward before slamming his fist into the ground to deal damage within that area. It deals 200 damage to troopers, meaning it can one-hit kill any trooper in the game provided they're not buffed, and it deals slightly reduced damage to heroes, dealing 150 damage instead. Not only does it deal damage, but it also knocks enemies off their feet, which can be very handy as well, and it requires a 15-second cooldown, which honestly is pretty decent considering this ability can be solid when you use it in the right situations. So that is it for all of his base stats and abilities, and now we are going to move on to some tips for Galactic Assault and Supremacy, starting off with his best star cards. Keep in mind these cards are just a matter of opinion. There aren't really any loadouts in the game that are objectively the best or anything like that, but these are just what I find to work best in these modes. The first card I'd recommend is his bonus health card, and this one just obviously increases his base HP, giving him an extra 150 HP when fully upgraded, taking his health to 850, which is absolutely mental, especially when you consider that that is nearly 200 more health than the average blaster user. And with how slow and cumbersome Chewie is, the added health is definitely useful, so this one is a no-brainer. The second card I'd recommend is the Impervious card, and this one is actually insane if you can manage to utilize it well. With this card equipped, every 200 damage that you deal with Chewie's abilities will give you 2% damage reduction to a maximum of 34%. So if you were to kill 4 heavies with a charge slam, for example, that'd give you 8% damage reduction permanently in that life, and it obviously just keeps on stacking until 34%. And if you make it to that 34% threshold, that's the equivalent of having 1140 HP. So that is obviously just insane, and this card pretty much speaks for itself. The third card I'd recommend is the Echoing Roar card, and this one makes it so that each time you get a kill with Furious Bowcaster, it will extend the duration of the ability by up to 40%. Now this card really helps keep that ability alive a lot longer, and you can get some insane multi-kills because of this when you're on maps like Naboo or Starkiller Base, for example. So again, this just really adds to Chewie's firepower, which is definitely a necessity. Now moving on to the best maps to choose him on in Galactic Assault, the 3 maps that I personally think he's the best on are Jakku, Endor and Starkiller Base. Those are just the 3 that I've seen to do the best with him on over the last 3 years. He has such a unique playstyle, and all of these maps do have a mix of the long and close range areas that it does allow you to position yourself on the map a bit easier compared to maps where there's often nowhere to find safety. Now moving on to some general tips for Galactic Assault and Supremacy, and Chewie is definitely one of the harder characters to use like I mentioned earlier. His playstyle is just so much different to everyone else in the game, and while he can still be a very decent character, he definitely feels a little bit inconsistent at times, and you can even see from most of the top kill streakers that he's definitely not the most viable hero compared to a lot of the others. There's honestly only one thing that you need to focus on when you're playing as Chewie, and that is essentially your map positioning and situational awareness. We all know that when you get a hero, especially the likes of say Vader or Luke for example, that you feel pretty invincible at times, and it's always fun to just forget about everyone else in the lobby and try and actually be a hero, going around and killing as many people as you can and sort of putting the team on your back as much as possible. That's what draws most people to wanting to play as the heroes, and I'm exactly the same. It's so much fun, and with certain heroes it can be a possibility, but I'll say it right now, unless you're in maybe the top 0.1% of players in the world, that absolutely will not work with Chewie, at least not consistently anyway. Chewie does require a lot of help from his teammates. He's not the type of character you can really just sort of send it on the enemy team and expect to kill them all, so if you are struggling with Chewie and you want to improve, then definitely just remove that mindset straight away. Instead, you should be trying to play alongside your teammates, giving them support while they also give you support at the same time, and you will really benefit from being near each other because of that. Think of it in the same way that we see in the movies. Chewie is obviously a very powerful character and he's an awesome warrior, yet you don't really see Chewie going and winning battles on his own like you see with Luke, Anakin or Vader. When Chewie is winning battles, it's alongside Han and Luke and Leia. He's not amazing on his own, but he is a really great supporting cast to those characters, and that honestly translates perfectly to Battlefront 2. There's really not that much else to say for Chewie, to be honest. It all comes down to just practicing and knowing where you should or shouldn't be on each different map, which you can only really get through lots of playtime and even just watching some of those bigger kill streaks and seeing exactly how they position themselves on the map, but it is something that takes quite a while to learn. Each time you die with Chewie, try and sort of sit there and think about why you died, whether you were playing too aggressively or whether you weren't sticking with your teammates or whatever the case may be, and then the next time you try and play Chewie, try and incorporate what you learned from your last death and adapt your gameplay accordingly. It will take time, guys. I still honestly suck with Chewie for the most part, but compared to how I used to be, I've definitely improved, and that's purely just from playtime and trying to learn where I go wrong each and every time I have a failed kill streak. To sum summarize, your biggest strength in these modes is your teammates, and you're their biggest strength as well. It's also super important to focus on map positioning and trying to find the areas on the map that suit Chewie the best, which honestly just comes from a lot of playtime. So now moving on to the hero vs villain game modes, and Chewie is much easier to use in these modes in my opinion, but he is still far from the best character. Starting off with his star cards, and the first card that I recommend is his bonus health card that I mentioned earlier. This one speaks for itself, so there's not too much to touch on here. The second card I'd recommend is the shocked and vulnerable card, and this one just makes it so that enemies who are shocked by his shock grenade will take up to 10% more damage, which can be a lifesaver in a do or die moment. Honestly, this card isn't amazing, but his card choices for these modes aren't amazing in general, so this card is kind of just the best of a bad selection. The third card I'd recommend is the Furious Resilience card, and this one causes Chewie to take up to 20% less damage when Furious Bowcaster is active. This is another one that just adds to his survivability, and at the end of the day, that is definitely a good choice for Chewie. Now, if you're not a fan of that second card, then you can always run the Impervious card that I mentioned earlier. This actually can help a lot if you can manage to get on a bit of a kill streak or even just deal a lot of damage, but it's definitely not quite as good as it is in the Trooper mode, so just keep that in mind as well, but it is a very solid card choice nonetheless. Now, moving on to some enemies that you might need to keep an eye out for in these modes, and the three that I think are the most deadly are Vader, Count Dooku, and Kylo Ren. These guys just speak for themselves really. Their damage output and their abilities are all very dangerous for Chewie, so just be wary of these guys when you see them on the battlefront. Now finally moving on to just some regular tips for these hero game modes, and honestly his playstyle is very simple in these modes in that you essentially just want to constantly be shooting and dealing damage as much as possible. Even if it doesn't result in kills of your own, you'll still be helping your team a lot if you can at least just cause some decent damage. Chewie's ADS shots with the Bowcaster do actually have splash damage, meaning they'll deal damage through blocks on saber heroes, so even though it's not actually going to deal all that much damage, it's a great idea to constantly just sort of spam those saber heroes and cause them to freak out. If they're blocking and they still take damage, they will start to panic and probably jump around a bit or even just run away, and as simple as it sounds, unsettling those enemies will affect them and allow your teammates to be at an advantage. It really is as simple as that, honestly. His Bowcaster never overheats and it fares pretty well at long range and at close range, so honestly just shoot enemies whenever you possibly can. Save Furious Bowcaster for when you need it in a 1v1 or when an enemy is low on health, and try to use Charge Slam or Shock Grenade as more defensive abilities in order to save yourself when you need them. To summarize, focus on damage as much as possible and don't feel like you have to be getting kills in order to play your role. And then in terms of his abilities, they all serve a useful purpose, and it's definitely best to sort of try and save those abilities until you need them rather than trying to use them too aggressively. So that is going to do it for this Chewie hero guide, guys. It feels so great to finally get this one finished, as I know you guys have been asking for it for a long time now, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy the video and if it did help you out, then be sure to leave a like down below to support the channel, and be sure to subscribe with those notifications on so you don't miss out on any more Star Wars Battlefront 2 content. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.